Remember the number 7. Now, I enjoy the study of the Bible, and you know that numbers in the Bible are significant. Nothing is just haphazardly in the Bible. It's not like God is speaking to the prophet or the writer of that passage and saying, oh, just come up with a number that sounds interesting. It's a God-given number. And for those of you who have studied numbers in the Bible, they all have significance. The number 1 speaks about God, the Father, and unity. Number 2 speaks of the Son. Number 3 speaks of the Holy Trinity. 4 speaks of created things. 5 speaks of grace. Grace, it's what God adds to created things. 6 is the number of man. You've all heard the number 666. It speaks about the ultimate man, the Antichrist. Number 7 is an interesting number. It is mentioned more than any other number in the Bible. It's mentioned over 350 times. The number 7 refers to God's perfection, divine perfection, the completion of things according to God's plan. And I don't want to talk about too many of the stories of number 7. Do you remember that the earth was created in 7 days, right? And when the children of Israel went into the promised land, the first city they came to was Jericho. And God told them to march around the city for 7 days. And the final day, 7 times. There's many examples of 7 in the Bible. I learned a new one today from this past few days from Pastor Harry. Do you know that Jesus bled? It mentions Jesus bleeding 7 times. 7 represents God's plan, His perfect plan, the completion of God's plan. And I'd like to suggest one other thing. The number 8 represents new beginnings. Amen. The number 8 represents the new thing. So if 7 represents the perfection or completion of things, I want to suggest that between the perfection and completion and the new thing, there's a very difficult thing. And the very difficult thing is death. Jesus said that unless a seed fall into the ground and die, it will not bear fruit. Every new thing that God brings us to, it says in the Bible that He takes us from glory to glory. And the human part of me, the carnal part of me, wants to believe it's just a straight line going up. But you know, when the prophets would look ahead to the future and they would see the great promises of God, it's like they could see the ranges of mountains. But you can't always see the valleys in between those mountains. And that valley is what they talk about in Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. We all must pass through times in our life when there is a death. Whether it's the death of a dream, the death of a vision, even a physical death. You know, I've preached this message, and I can't tell you the number of times people have raised their hands and said, you know, I've just suffered the loss of a close friend, or my family, or my husband, or my wife. Death is part of the experience of where God is going to take us. This number 7, I mentioned I was reading the story of the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant being in the land of the Philistines for 7 months. And I knew that wasn't an accident. So I'm doing my Bible study and I take a little pause and I turn on the television news. And at the very moment, President Bush, this is before the last election, you know, President Obama was elected. It's just before that. He comes on the television and he says, Americans, I have some bad news that you're all aware of. We're in a financial crisis. I know Great Britain is in a financial crisis also, right? And we're in a financial crisis, and I am concerned that if we don't do something, it will become a terrible crisis. So what I'm proposing to the American public is that we give our banking system $700 billion. And as soon as he said that, the number 7 came to my mind again. I had just finished reading about 7, just studying and thinking about it, and he's saying $700 billion. So I'm proposing that Congress will vote on that this weekend. So they have a vote over the weekend, and you may not remember, but that weekend Congress votes, and they tell President Bush, no. We vote this proposal down. We're not giving $700 billion. Monday morning, the stock market opens in New York. By the end of the day, the stock market had fallen 777 points. In fact, 777.68. And if you add 6 and 8 together, that's 14, right? A multiple of 7. And I said, you know, this is not just a series of unfortunate events. This is not happenstance. We are living in a world that it says in Psalm 2 that God sits in the heavens and laughs because the nations gather together and they plot against the Lord's Messiah. But God is not confounded. God is not surprised by anything. He is in control.
Amen.
I think we started out this morning saying Jesus is Lord. Does anyone believe that?
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
You know, in the United States, we never had a king. In fact, that was one of the separating points between America and Great Britain, right? King George. But one thing you do have, if you come from a land that has a king, you have lords too, right?
Amen.
So we think in our country that our president is not the king of America. He is our greatest servant. But it's different here in this country. The king or queen mainly is the owner of the country. The king or queen can go anywhere in Great Britain or the Commonwealth and say, I want this, and I can have this. And I don't think anyone can dispute it. And so when we say Jesus is Lord, it means he owns not only the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns everything. He owns everything.
He does.
He is above time and space.
Amen.
He looks down at the world. He's not surprised or shocked. He is in control.
Amen.
So this financial crisis started unreeling. And you could see people becoming anxious. I mean, there were people that were really concerned because they were losing fortunes overnight. So I began to preach this message that God is in control. There is a shaking and instability that's going on. I saw a survey, you know, they do these, they ask people questions all over the place.
Yeah.
In the United States, they did a survey and they discovered that 40% of Americans, this is an American study, 40% of Americans suffer from anxiety. Do you know what anxiety is? It's the fear of the unknown. 40%, 4 out of 6 Americans are afraid of the future because they don't know what will happen. But you, if you know Jesus, you know what will happen.
Yes.
Right? We win.
Yeah, we do. Amen.
The Lord wins.
Amen.
And He's coming again.
Yes.
And this is all part of this plan. The shaking that is going on, He's in control of it. For the last so many years, there has been so much injustice in this world. Right at this time of this financial crisis, there was a man who hit the news. His name was Bernard Madoff. Have you ever heard of him? He was an investor in America. And what he did is he cheated people out of money. They eventually put him into jail. And after many months passed, they speculate, they don't know exactly how much he stole, but they project